Greetings, citizens! This month, we're delving into the development of the latest patch. But first, we want to get into one of the key changes to your subscriber magazine mentioned last month. The short story is that JumpPoint will publish bi-monthly from now on. Ultimately, we want JumpPoint to continue and get better, and the only way to do that is to give it more time. So, we're doing one magazine every 2 months, with the next issue in October celebrating a full decade of Star Citizen. But going forward, you can expect more developer content, deeper dives into tech, your usual exclusive narrative content, and a few twists along the way. We're currently planning the next 12 months of content, and it's going to be an exciting year in the verse and on these pages. Finally, whether this is your first issue, you've been here from the beginning with David, or you found us somewhere in between with Ben, we want to thank you for reading and supporting JumpPoint. Let us know if there's anything you'd like us to cover in the coming issues on Spectrum, and we'll see what we can do. JumpPoint team. As we approach Alpha 4.0, the need for smaller updates has meant point patches are required to get new gameplay, locations, and vehicles into the verse between the significant additions to the backend. So, here we are with a smaller patch to keep us going, while the development of persistence and other necessary tech barrels on in the background. Alpha 3.17.2 won't be the last patch before the big jump to Pyro, and it certainly won't be the last with content as interesting as this. In last month's issue, we delved into the biggest dynamic event to grace the verse, but it will be remiss to not use this opportunity to try and glean what's next for Seige of Orison from the team that created it. Principal system designer Elliot Maltby assured us, like everything, we'll get the chance to iterate, improve, and add variations. We don't want to spoil anything directly for it though. So while system design are remaining tight-lipped, it's safe to say Orison isn't quite safe yet. Previously capped at 50, Alpha 3.17.2 raises the maximum number of players that can experience the verse together to around 100. The specific number fluctuates slightly depending on what's happening in Stanton. We asked Robert Johnson, engineering director of the Persistent Universe, why they chose the latest patch to increase the player cap. We ended up here because we were at a point in development where we were particularly focused on server performance to improve the Seige of Orison experience, and found that running 50 players on 2 game servers on 1 VM virtual machine was pretty much equivalent performance-wise to running 100 players on 1 game server on 1 VM. Johnson further explains how performance between the 2 options was so close. Because the 2 servers will fight for resources, we see more contention such as delays waiting for operations to complete than running the same code on 1 server. As our engine has been steadily made more scalable over time, removing that contention but adding 50 players ended up being similar in frame time. As we want to get as many players into servers as is realistically possible, it made sense to up the player count for this patch. Besides giving players more human pilots to fight alongside and against, increasing the player count came with the benefit of largely nullifying the server's out-of-memory issues and ultimately simplified how the game is deployed. However, despite the benefits of more players on a single server, Simply opening the door to as many as possible wouldn't have worked, Johnson explains. That it's a fine balance between performance, cost, and stability. For example, the more players we have per server, the more damaging a crash is, as it affects more players per occurrence. Also, higher server caps would affect some in-game features and mission balance. So, we need to be mindful of making these things scalable as we go. With the increased player cap established and Alpha 3.18 on the horizon, what's next for Johnson and his team? Next is persistent entity streaming in Alpha 3.18 and server meshing beyond that, where it's important to push on for higher player counts per server so that as we expand the play area in-game, we maintain a decent player density. So, like many other key updates to the verse, the 100 cap is just the beginning of opening up the play space to even more players. Although an anti-air vehicle like the Ballista, the Centurion swaps the long-range missile loadout for a hefty quad laser turret designed for short-range attacks, capable of disintegrating some of the most dangerous vehicles in the verse. It's a boon to any ground attack or defense force. When we made the Centurion and Spartan, we started by reviewing which of the three areas of the vehicle would stay and which would be altered. We essentially have the front, mid, and rear sections, and between the Atlas variants, alter those. The Ballista and Centurion share primarily the front two sections with bespoke rear sections, whereas the Spartan shares the front section and has a bespoke middle and rear. We have nothing planned as of this moment to create further variants, but never say never. I've always wanted to do a more traditional ground artillery vehicle, and I think the Atlas platform will be perfect for that. So while nothing's on the external or internal ship roadmap, more Atlas vehicles could be shaking up Star Citizen's ground game at some point. Alpha 3.17.2's criminal delivery missions give everyone, regardless of morality, the opportunity to keep the underworld turning by hauling goods across the system. Pyro is, in general, a lawless system, but that doesn't mean there are no rules, just that UEE law is only enforced in very few spaces. In any other part of the system, whoever owns the area of space makes the rules. This way, you might find yourself on a gang-controlled station where slavery is legal. But that doesn't mean you can kill gang bosses without breaking their rules and eventually getting killed or captured by the gang's goons. That being said, if you manage to exit the gang's territory, your actions will not be considered a crime. So, in this aspect, Pyro allows us to play with a lot more shades of gray when it comes to missions. Players will be able to get good reputation with certain gangs, but not others. They will have areas of space where they will be shot on sight, while other factions will embrace them and see them as heroes for deeds that, in Stanton, might have sent them straight to jail. So, the criminal missions introduced to Stanton are just the tip of the entrepreneurial iceberg for gifted pirates and smugglers. When asked what's on the immediate horizon, Truffin explains he and his team are currently working on two fronts. First, using existing mission modules to expand on existing content with greater diversity. And secondly, working on new mission modules that will drive completely new mission types. Regardless of playstyle, coming content will offer both morally intact and corrupt players the opportunity to make a lucrative living hauling cargo across the verse. Planetary navigation mesh is a complicated feature with clear to see benefits. It allows non-playable characters, NPCs, to move around planetary locations, be it on foot, flying a ship, or driving a ground vehicle. Although most visible around the recently added crashed ship sites and posts, navigation mesh is now built into the back end of every planetary location. Navigation links are the information included in the navigation mesh, allowing NPCs to find paths that connect navigation mesh islands. We're currently expanding our system to allow them to correctly support mantling, vaulting, ladders, and locked doors. Another big focus for us is supporting ground vehicles. We want NPCs to be able to drive rovers, cars, forklifts, and anything else that moves on the ground. Across all AI teams, we have a large initiative for improving the combat experience in all aspects of the game. We're also adding a lot of functionality to allow enemy combatants to use more weapon types, mounted guns, grenades, rocket launchers, etc. Benefit from the medical gameplay loop, healing themselves or others, and utilize the looting loop so they can find more ammo, better weapons, and so on. We're also expanding perception to allow NPCs to perceive characters while in spaceships so that combat is expanded to allow ground to vehicle scenarios and vice versa. A call for help by ambushed and outgunned NPCs. These beacons provide players with the option of engaging in varying combat missions as they travel around the verse. Alpha 3.17.2 brought an extensive overhaul to the whole system that Persistent Universe gameplay director Tony Zervik says is substantially deeper than it might first appear. The mission logic was completely rewritten in Alpha 3.17.2 and exploits many gameplay improvements that have subsequently been added. This includes the extensive use of reputation so that you only gradually gain access to increasingly more difficult and financially rewarding scenarios by successfully completing simpler ones. Some of the most challenging scenarios now involve multiple capital ships and their fleets attacking an entire armada of freighters, and can't likely be won except by groups of players. In 2380, Earth's nations came together and, following a lengthy and contentious negotiations, agreed to a previously unfathomable outcome to unify under one central government that would lead humanity's expansion into space. While many celebrated the creation of the United Nations of Earth, UNE, others decided to fight back, leading to a bloody and contentious 4 years of unrest between 2380 and 2384, known as the Unification Wars. On October 20th, 2380, an armed group of Americano crew members mutinied and took control of the ship. Their initial plan was to use Stanley to liberate their country from the tyranny of the UNE by attacking a number of Earth's major cities if the demands for the return of Americano sovereignty were not met. In a heroic and highly successful operation, the UNE Navy disabled and recaptured Stanley without a single casualty. In June of 2381, an intelligence report noted the frontier settlement of Syrtis on Mars, home to a large contingent of expats from Sumacadia who opposed dissolution of their country, had opened their city to anti-unificationists allied to any former nation. On January 4th, 2383, the military seized the settlement in the middle of the night and, after a brief yet bloody battle, took control of Syrtis. On July 29, 2384, the UNE Navy received word that a military warship that had vanished the previous week was approaching New York City. For hours, the sky above New York City became ablaze in battle. Residents sought refuge in basements and subway tunnels as debris and damaged ships crashed into the city. Some of their warships fired randomly upon buildings, while others intentionally crashed into the city instead of surrendering. With the number of Anti-Unification Alliance AUA ships dwindling, several of the rebellious ships fled instead of surrendering. The fight for New York City finally brought the mainstream anti-unification movement to an end. The random and mass destruction wrought on New York City and its surrounding area angered UNE residents and turned the general public against the movement for good. While the Unification Wars saw humanity face great divisions and terrible internal strife, the result coalesced support behind and solidified the sovereignty of a human unified government that will boldly lead the species into the wider universe. Honor the brave pilots who test flew the first commercial spacecraft with RSI's Zeus exploration suit, styled to match the design used centuries ago but updated with all the technology and conveniences expected by modern day explorers. This limited edition suit is available in 3 distinct colors.
So I was looking at the new Aurora, but then I was thinking, maybe I should get something that looks a little more classy. But then I was like, no, I need something that looks like total shit. Okay, maybe I don't need all that cargo space, so what about the Legionnaire? Now we're talking. Now how about some shittier guns? A little shittier. No, a little shittier. There we go. Now let's add some rockets on there. Yeah, those look fucking horrible. Alright, now let's just add some air conditioning, because out of all this shit I need something good. That'll help me a lot. And don't forget about the fucking ugly ass leather. Oh yeah, that looks fucking horrible. Alright, let's see what this shit thing can do. Okay, maybe I do need that fucking cargo space back.
RSI's Aurora. There are many like it, but this one is shittier.